Theodore Roosevelt lived his life to the hilt. At the Sorbonne in Paris in 1910, he famously said in a speech, "It is not the critic who counts, not the man who points out how the strong man stumbles or where the doer of deeds could have done them better. The credit belongs to the man who is actually in the arena, whose face is marred with dust and sweat and blood, who strives valiantly, who errs and comes short again and again, because there is no effort without error and shortcoming. But who does actually strive to do the deeds, who knows the great enthusiasms, the great devotions, who spends himself in a worthy cause, who at best knows in the end the triumph of high achievement, and who at worst, if he fails, at least fails while daring greatly, so that his place shall never be with those cold and timid souls who know neither victory nor defeat." Teddy Roosevelt was a doer of deeds. You can tell by his resume. Across his life, he was, get this, statesman, conservationist, naturalist, historian, writer, cowboy, police commissioner, governor, colonel, vice president, president, and maybe most importantly, the inspiration for the teddy bear. You'd be hard-pressed to find a bigger doer of deeds than him. I'd like to think that I think. I know I talk, probably too much. I believe in God. But what I think, say, and even what I believe matters very little compared to what I do. I recently lost my drive. It didn't happen overnight. There was a personal family loss, the pandemic, business troubles, but eventually I awoke to the fact that I was severely distracted, spending way too much time online consuming rather than creating. I had become the cold and timid soul in Roosevelt's speech. Yet as my work suffered, other parts of my life were going well. I stayed on my fitness goals, my learning goals, and my creativity goals other than work. I looked at where I had this success and recognized a pattern. In all the areas where I was doing well, there was play. I would never let my fitness goals slip because I had an accountability partner that I talked to every week. He's my oldest friend that I've known and competed with and against for 40 years. And the idea of stating a goal to him and then having to face his wrath if I didn't complete the goal that I said I would was enough to keep me on track. My learning goals stayed top of mind for the same reason. I have a memorization app that tracks my level against all users of the app. Now, competing with my best friend, I kind of get, but competing with faceless usernames actually worked? Yes, that's the power of play. My biggest creative achievement over the last year came at a miserable time. It was the beginning of March, and the long road of the pandemic had just begun. I was questioning where my drive went, and I found myself not knowing who or where I was. Our country was growing more polarized and animosity seemed to be everywhere, especially online. And yet online was where I was spending most of my time. To be fair, it wasn't my time online that bothered me as much as my mind online. The information highway was a one-way street for me as I rented, downloaded, streamed, and overconsumed. They don't call it binge watching for nothing. So I did what anyone concerned about spending too much time online would do. I launched a YouTube channel. To be fair, I thought I would be more happy creating content than consuming it. My books and films are all about celebrating inventors and promoting creativity, connection, and play. So a natural extension of these projects became my YouTube series, Where's the Fun From? I make videos that tell the stories behind the greatest playthings ever created. It's been an absolute blast to do and therapeutic. So if rapid force is applied to them, they become entangled, and it allows the putty to act like an elastic solid. And therein lies their magic. So homely and yet so cute. I remember filling the cracked back tire of my big wheel with dry dirt from underneath our tire swing, so that when I rode it, the dirt came out the back and looked like a cloud of smoke. At least to me it did. It was loud, action-packed, and culminated with the... That sound can instantly bring us back to the robot bouts of our youth. Although I cringe at the quality of some of the early videos, the channel is improving and so am I. the intrinsic motivation to make these videos, and the play that ensues once the camera rolls has been informative. I wondered if play could help me excel in these areas of my life. Could it help me rediscover the joy of my work? Most play researchers agree that there's a fun for fun's sake element to the best kinds of play. Dr. Peter Gray says that true play is an activity where the means are valued more than the ends. Dr. Stuart Brown, another prominent play theorist, defines play as purposeless. Both of them are describing a type of play known as free play. It's self-chosen, self-directed, imaginative, and fun. By this definition, most researchers would not classify organized sports or even board games as play technically. As opposed to taking these activities out from under the banner of play, I think it's better to make a distinction between free play and other forms of play, like strategic play, for example. I plan to use strategic play in gamifying my goals, with the ends very much the target and purpose very much the goal. I think this is okay. Dr. Stuart Brown himself says that play is personal. What's fun for you might be absolutely terrifying to me, and what's tantalizing to me might be tedium to you. I also don't think of work and play in binary terms. Some play advocates encourage people to set aside time for play apart from work. I would much rather incorporate play into my work. I want my career to be full of joy, and all work and no play is no laughing matter. One powerful way to understand and conceptualize the importance of play is to see what happens when you take it away. Play theorist and researcher Brian Sutton Smith famously said, "The opposite of play is not work, it's depression." Neuroscientist Jaak Panksepp discovered that play is a very old instinct within the brain of mammals. His research showed that play is not a learned activity. It doesn't come from the newest part of the brain, the cortex, the outer part of the brain, but he found that it comes from a deep, primal, primitive part of the brain, and that it is of crucial importance. He and his researchers found that rats deprived of play are less resilient and don't recover from stress very well. When I first heard about this research, I said, that sounds like me. It was once thought that play behavior only helped animals practice for adulthood, and now we know it does so much more. Through reciprocal play, a child learns how to interact successfully with others in his or her world. There is a moral underpinning to play, a call to a wellspring much deeper than mere fun. The basis for human trust is built through play. In his book Affective Neuroscience, Panksepp describes how paired juvenile rats wrestle and pin one another in a form of play fighting known as rough and tumble play. Play dominance clearly emerges if two rats are allowed to play together repeatedly. After several play episodes, one rat typically tends to become the winner, in that it ends up on top more often during pins. On the average, the split is that the winner ends up on top about 70% of the time, while the loser achieves less success. But the continuation of play appears to require reciprocity and the stronger partner's willingness to handicap itself. If one animal becomes a bully and aspires to end up on top all the time, playful activity gradually diminishes and the less successful animal begins to ignore the winner. Without reciprocity, play ends. In 1908, a sports writer by the name of Grantland Rice wrote a not-so-famous poem with a very famous final line. For when the one great scorer comes to write against your name, he marks not if you won or lost, but how you played the game. As any parent of a 3-year-old who loses a game of Candyland can attest, this is a hard lesson to learn. Pete Rose, Major League Baseball's all-time hits leader, famously quipped, "Whoever said it's not whether you win or lose, but how you play the game is full of it. Winning makes all the difference in the world. Winning is fun. Losing sucks." You gotta forgive old Charlie Hustle for missing the deeper meaning of these words. He did hit a ball with a club for a living, after all. Why do parents still tell their kids it's how you play the game 113 years after Rice wrote his poem? Because of course those words are true. They're so true that even rats know they're true. Psychologist Jordan Peterson sheds light on this. He's been unpacking this play ethic in his lectures for years. The key to understanding Panksepp's rat wrestling research is really two things. Rats enjoy play. They will work, Panksepp showed, to play. And secondly, he paired rats together repeatedly over time. In his book Beyond Order, Peterson writes, "The universal rules of fair play include the ability to regulate emotion and motivation while cooperating and competing in pursuit of the goal during the game. That is part and parcel of being able to play at all, as well as the ability and will to establish reciprocally beneficial interactions across time and situation. And life is not simply a game, but a series of games. The best player is therefore not the winner of any given game, but among many other things, he or she who is invited by the largest number of others to play the most extensive series of games." And so it turns out that the preschool accolade plays well with others might just be the most important lesson anyone can learn. As a game inventor, I end up writing a lot of rules, and one thing they all include is the object of the game. The object of Candyland is to be the first to reach home sweet home. The object of Monopoly is to be the last player left in the game after all the other players are bankrupt. And the object of the game of life? No, the object of the game of life is to play with your future self and the future of others in mind. Because there's more than one you and you're not alone. Down south they say y'all, as in how y'all doing. In South Jersey, where I'm from, they say yous, as in how you's doing. My mom used to bristle if she heard any of her kids using the word use. Use is not a word, she would say. I used to believe that, of course, but now I'm not so sure. As Jaak Panksepp's research showed, and Jordan Peterson expounds upon, there isn't just the you of today, but multiple yous that spread across time. So a goal that is good for you today may not necessarily be good for you tomorrow, as any big rat with no other rat that will play with him knows. The best goals and strategies are good for you today, the you of tomorrow, the you of next week, and all the yous in the future. Coming up with goals and strategies that meet this criteria is difficult, but the best things often are. It's impossible to talk about play and goal setting without discussing flow. The term was first coined by a Hungarian psychologist named Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi, who defined it as a state of optimal experience and heightened focus when you're stretched to your limit in a voluntary effort to accomplish something difficult and worthwhile. So does that sound more like play or work to you? Optimal experience, heightened, voluntary, worthwhile? The elements of flow include intense focus. You're locked into the task at hand and everything else disappears. Secondly, there's a diminished sense of self. So when you're in a deep flow state, you forget to eat. And this also silences your inner critic, that voice in the back of your head that no one likes. Thirdly, there's a deep, effortless involvement, even though, as we already covered, the task you're working on is difficult. Fourth, there's an altered sense of time in flow. You're working on a project for what feels like 30 minutes, you check your watch and it's been 3 hours. And finally, because you feel challenged but not overwhelmed, there's often a deep sense of control while you're in flow. Stephen Cutler is the author of Rise of Superman, Decoding the Science of Ultimate Human Performance. In the book, he discovers people that can turn flow on and off like a faucet. Extreme sport athletes. This makes sense, right? Because if you're this woman and you're skateboarding downhill, you need a deep sense of control. And if you're this guy and you're free climbing without ropes 150 feet above the earth, you need that diminished sense of self. You can't afford an inner critic. If you're looking for a toehold like him, the last thing you need is a voice in the back of your head saying, "I don't think you're going to reach it." And if you're this guy, you absolutely need focus. No one in this position, inverted 70 feet in the air with a 200-pound dirt bike over their head, ever thinks, "What should I eat for lunch?" That never happens. Extreme sport athletes find control, they find a way to silence their inner critic, and they find focus, or they find themselves in the hospital or worse. Now, by anyone's metrics, what these extreme sport athletes do is challenging. No one would ever accuse them of not daring greatly, right? Well, this research has convinced me that the loss of my drive is not because my work was too difficult, but just the opposite. One of the keys to entering flow is the need for the challenge of the goal before you to be the same or slightly greater than your skill level. This is known as the challenge skills ratio. So say you're just learning how to play the piano. Your skill level is low, but if you're attempting something where the challenge is quite high, like playing a piece by Mozart in public, say, you're going to feel pretty anxious. You're going to be up here in the upper left. Here's what I think happened to me. As my career progressed and my skill set improved, I didn't challenge myself enough, and I fell out of flow down here into control, and eventually down further into relaxation. Now, there's nothing wrong with control, or relaxation for that matter, if you want to be a chomper of cheese. But if you want to be a doer of deeds, it's not a recommended state of mind. This need to push ourselves and present a challenge aligns perfectly with what we know about modern goal setting. University of Toronto psychologist Gary Latham and University of Maryland psychologist Edwin Locke have been studying goal setting and performance for 30 years. They have found that big, specific goals way outperform small goals, medium-sized goals, and vague goals. So to recap, the best goals are games that are repeatable, challenging, and reciprocal, because we're not alone. While at Harvard, Nicholas Christakis and James Fowler wrote the book Connected, the surprising power of our social networks and how they shape our lives. And in the book, they talk about their 3 degrees of influence theory, which basically states that your social influence travels to not just the person that you know directly, but up to 3 degrees of separation away. This means that if you decide to eat healthy, your friend will be more likely to also eat healthy. But not just your friend. Your friend's friend is more likely to eat healthy, and your friend's friend's friend is also more likely to eat healthy. Even when you get 1 or 2 degrees away from the person you know directly, your influence exerts itself. If Stanley Milgram's famous 6 degrees of separation theory shows us how connected we are, then Christakis and Fowler's 3 degrees of influence theory demonstrates how contagious we are. The moral implications of being connected and contagious should be obvious to everyone. If everything you do travels further than you know, then everything you do matters. We're all super spreaders. The question is, what are we spreading? Other researchers have tested Christakis and Fowler's theory and have found the transmissibility of everything from obesity to cooperation, voting, and even happiness. It's obvious why sitcoms use laugh tracks. It's not just yawns that are contagious. Italian researchers at the University of Parma were the first to discover mirror neurons in monkeys. These specialized brain cells activate not only when a monkey grabs a banana with its hand, say, but also if it looks at another monkey grab a banana with its hand. Researchers believe that this neuromirroring may help us interpret and understand the minds of others and play a part in our ability to empathize. See a genuine smile, and it's almost impossible not to smile yourself. So now I'm on a quest to inject some joy back into my work life. I want to gamify my goals to create games for the greatest good. Good for me and my business, of course, but also good for my family, my community, and who knows? I want to be a doer of deeds again. If you're thinking about jumping in with me, but you're not quite sure, maybe you're on the dock sort of thinking about it, let me give you 2 more points to maybe convince you to take the plunge. You and I are neotenous, meaning we retain the ability to play like children into adulthood and across our entire lives. This is great news. You know how to do it. It's like skipping a rock, or, hence the expression, like riding a bike. We play for a longer period of time than any other organism on Earth. Researchers like developmental psychologist Jean Piaget hypothesize that the larger the brain, the more an animal needs to play, because we're gathering all that information to figure out how to act in the world. Free play allows us the freedom and a safe place through trial and error to make mistakes, learn from them, and then use that knowledge to build ourselves from the ground up. Knowing a lot about play and actually doing something to incorporate play into our lives are two separate things. I know play is good for me. I know it reduces stress, releases endorphins, boosts creativity, improves brain function. So why don't I do it more? I think somehow over the years I've gotten more self-conscious. Maybe fear is creeping in. Fear of what other people might think? I don't know. I do know that one of the most playful and fearless people that I've ever met is a guy named Ren Geyer. Talk about a doer of deeds. Ren is responsible for Twister and a toy line called Nerf. These toys have generated $8 billion in retail sales. He's also the founder of a music company that has won a Grammy and 2 CMA Song of the Year awards. Plus, he's the founder of an educational company that has a reading system that is in 1,800 school districts across the United States. In 2005, I helped Ren write his book, Right Brain Red, 7 Ideas for Creative Success. One of the most playful chapters is one called What Happens If? Ren writes, open sesame, abracadabra, or alakazam probably won't get you the gold you're looking for, but I have found 3 other magic words that just might. What happens if? Ren uses these words to launch brainstorming meetings, and as you've probably already guessed, he's been pretty successful at those. He contends that what happens if opens up the room to collaboration and playfulness. It imposes no unintentional limits on those on your team. But probably the most important thing that these 3 magic words do is supercharge curiosity. Ren writes, I'm a big fan of curiosity. If it hadn't killed the cat, she might have died of boredom. Play is the perfect, safe place to risk failing. If we do it right, then we lose our sense of self and self-consciousness. And if we do it wrong, well, at least we know we're in the arena daring greatly. Thank you to the Association of Applied and Therapeutic Humor for asking me to put this talk together for their annual conference. The AATH is made up of humor professionals who are super spreaders of laughter and the knowledge of how to intentionally apply humor to make people's lives better. Now those are games worth playing. Thanks for watching. Please consider liking this video, subscribing to this channel, and hitting that notification bell so you never miss the fun or the learning. I'll let you know how I'm doing on my quest to gamify my goals, and I hope you do the same. Maybe we can encourage one another. Until then, seize the play.